Okay, good Monday, everyone. Welcome to Mondays with Manny. I am your host, Manny Rodriguez, and this is a live cast about discussing some common problems organizations face and how to deal with them using the science of behavior. So, special thanks to Business Science Magazine, 305 Publishing, the OBM Alliance, and of course, my teammates at Bona Ventures. And a special thanks to the live audience. We are going to do something a little bit different today. I have Rachel, Annie, and Selena here with me. They are members of an organization that attend Mondays with Manny almost every Monday, just about every Monday. So I'm not alone, which is nice. And they ask really good questions at the end. So we have a good time. But today we're going to do something a little bit different. And we're going to have it as just a conversation between us to see where it goes. It's kind of a live experiment, if you will. But the topic is going to be about how to stay focused at work given everything that's going on in our world. And the cool thing is that all four of us live in different places, right? We're not in the same city. We're not experiencing all the same things at the same time, and yet we are if we just watch the news or we pay attention to social media or whatever. And so, of course, what I am referring to as far as what we're dealing with today in the world, we have, of course, COVID-19 is still in effect. It's still going around. The data is still being tracked. A lot of states are in phase one or phase two of getting things back to some type of normalcy from before. And then the recent events of what happened with George Floyd, the situation with George Floyd and the police officer over in oh man, my mind just went blank. Minneapolis. That's what I was trying to say. And all of that situation that has created a bit of an upheaval all over the United States with regards to looting and riots and what have you. So this is kind of a unique situation. We're going to talk a little bit about it. And the premise of what I was hoping we do is we simply talk about how does one maintain focus? Most of us still go to work every day. We still have a job to do. Most all of us, I think, are working from home. But then outside of our home, there's all of these things going on. There's all of this noise, right? There's all of this stuff that wasn't around a few months ago. And so just for sake of discussion or just to kind of kick it off, it'd be kind of cool to let everybody know where in the world are we, right? To give kind of a geographic perspective. So I am in Florida. I'm in Melbourne, Florida, just east of Orlando. Rachel, where are you?
New York, Manhattan, New York.
Manhattan, New York. Annie, where are you?
I'm just outside of Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit, Michigan. And then Selena?
I am in downtown Chicago.
Okay, so if you recognize, three out of the four of us are in pretty major city areas, right? The closest city I'm in is Orlando, that's an hour, and then Miami is 3 hours south. So I'm not really in a major city area. So it'd be kind of so with everything going on, let's just paint a picture for the audience, right? Let's like give them an idea of what are we individually experiencing with regards to the state of the world, right? So for me, the I have two unique experiences, I guess, that have recently happened this weekend. One is learning that my own mother is in Miami, Florida, and there's a curfew down in South Florida because of the looting and riots going on there. And then even my young kids are talking about the news. They're hearing about it. They're talking about it, and it's a conversation with my 12, 8, and 6-year-old. And it's a really strange thing to discuss, looting and rioting and why people are doing those kind of things, right? So that's kind of the uniqueness. Work-wise, I'm working from home, but it's become a topic of conversation in just about every conversation I'm having, whether we're talking about safety or operations or whatever. So that's kind of from my perspective. Rachel, let's start with you. What about for you? What's the world like for you in New York?
Well, at first it was quiet, with everyone in quarantine. Streets were pretty much desolate. And now we have protesters that are not, peacefully protesting, but they are looting, they're rioting, they're like desecrating, religious, you have St. Patrick's Cathedral that's been desecrated where there's graffiti, and there's just masses of people in the streets, Times Square, protesting and just being violent. There are stores in the city that are starting to board up their storefronts. Stores that were opening, they have started to board up their storefronts to protect from looters and just people being violent.
Wow. It's crazy, and we've seen this in our history books, haven't we? We've seen this in the Rodney King, back then in the LA riots and things like that, and so it's just a little insane. Annie, what about for you?
So we live in a suburb outside of Detroit, but many of our friends live a little bit closer to the city, and they're staying active in protests that were initially peaceful. The first night there was a shooting and a death, unfortunately. But since then, I haven't heard of much in terms of it escalating that high. They do have a curfew. It's just, it's sad to look at the videos. I'm not taking part in any of that activity, but it is interesting to join in on a live and see the interactions and brutality seeming unnecessary each way. So it's sad that it's so close. But thankfully I'm in a space where I can be further away from it. I have brothers in Chicago, and Selena will probably add to this, and both of them, they can't leave today. They heard sirens till 2:30. Neighborhood shops are all broken into. So I'm feeling for you, Selena.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue to Selena, who's in Chicago. So, Selena, tell us what's going on from your perspective.
Yeah, so there were peaceful protests. Like, I definitely want that to be known. There are activists who are leading and truly trying to be heard. And unfortunately, there are those who are, in which there is looting and rioting. And Saturday night, the mayor had to institute a curfew, and the National Guard was also called in. And it's Sunday, it just expanded into the suburbs all the way up to the Wisconsin border area. It kind of just feels like it's a little bit of everywhere in kind of like the northern part of Illinois. But there is also a 5-mile radius in downtown Chicago that was closed off from Saturday. From this peaceful protest, then unfortunately into the evening, a lot of the downtown area did get destroyed. And there were a lot of buildings that did get, destroyed. There were cars that were burning, and there were helicopters flying over all night and all day, all weekend, and it just feels surreal. But yeah, the curfew is still instituted. The 5-mile radius of downtown is also still closed off. The National Guard is still here. It's kind of just a wait and see. And it's also really unfortunate because this week, the state of Illinois and Chicago was going to be moving into a different phase to lighten up some of the restrictions due to COVID. And some businesses and restaurants were going to be opening up, and they were all preparing to do so. And unfortunately, a lot of those restaurants now have severe damage to where nobody really knows, or at least there has not been, from what I have heard and seen, a definitive answer on what this week will look like. So
Yeah.
as now, this morning, that's kind of what it looks like.
I'm glad you brought that up because, and Selena, our hearts are with you because you're in a tough spot. I think that the other three of us were kind of isolated a little bit. Although Rachel did share with us that in a week or two, you have a test coming up, a really important test, and it happens to be in like the heart of things in downtown Manhattan. So I just I'll be definitely praying for you guys, and hopefully everything will turn out fine. But you mentioned something that I think was super important, and I want to segue into that. So you mentioned, businesses were about to open up, right? Chicago is, the state of Illinois is about to go to another phase. So a lot of other states as well. At least here in Florida, like in my city, lots of businesses have been open for a while, and there's that sense of a little bit of like getting back to things, right? And then all of a sudden, mass panic, mass hysteria, mass problems, right? So, if you think about it from the context of the workplace, right? So organizations, they were getting ready, and we all are working right now, thankfully. So we all have our jobs and we're working. And there comes a conversation that happens, at least frequently for me, and that's maintaining focus while all this stuff's going on, right? And it's very different than when things are going on in our personal lives that affect us at work, right? That's already hard enough to try to keep it isolated, right? I know for myself, if I have a lot of things going on at home, that's challenging, it sometimes bleeds into my work, right? And I have to like isolate the two. But this is different because this is our society at large affecting us, and almost to the point of we don't have any physical control over it. So I want to kind of segue into that. So the four of us, we're professionals in our own right. We've been doing a lot of great work in our own right. We have a long history. So if you got into conversations, and maybe you already have, if you got into conversations with colleagues who are stressing out about COVID or about the looting and rioting or about the state of the affairs in the future, some people are still worried about their longevity of their life, their careers, their jobs. Are they going to still have their jobs in months from now? So how do you help? What would be your advice to keeping people focused on what is their job and bringing them their income for their livelihood when all this stuff is going on? So I want to open up to if we were talking to people giving some advice, what would we say? How would you help them stay focused? Any thoughts?
Well, I work in a school setting, so it's our duty to educate our students as well. So I feel like we're in a different situation as opposed to maybe what businesses go through. I don't know, I've never been in one, but I work with high school students. So they're wondering, they're interested, they're seeing it. Maybe they're being active in some of the protests or whatever. So I think it's our job as teachers, especially as a white teacher to a lot of students that are also white, to open their eyes to the education around the issue, the root issue, and finding that root issue, which is systemic racism. So, I mean, but bringing them to some sort of awareness of that, I think it took me a very long time to realize that. I think that our society has changed a lot in terms of the wording, how we word it, how we teach it, how we aren't afraid to talk about it anymore. And if you are, it's okay to be uncomfortable. And that's kind of what I'm trying to bring my students to and my colleagues, is that it's okay to be uncomfortable. You will definitely probably say the wrong thing at some point, but you have to start. We have to start. I spent all weekend looking and reading and signing petitions and making some calls, and I've never done that before, and I'm 33. I should have done that a long time ago. So I want to instill that in some of my students. I want to make it a common practice with my colleagues, and I think our history teachers, they can bring, we've seen this happen before and this is what happened. So how can we either follow that trend or make it happen faster or do it a lot better, which is probably what we need to focus on.
Well, I really appreciated those comments, because what I took from that in a great way is don't avoid the conversations. Have the conversations, talk about it, see where people are at, and help them, guide them into being productive citizens in this crazy world. And whether that's signing petitions or doing the protests that are nonviolent, wherever their passion is, but don't avoid the conversation, right? Because once we avoid the conversation, it doesn't mean the problem goes away. It just means they're going to talk about it somewhere else, right? So brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. What about Rachel? What do you think?
I really don't have anything to, I can piggyback on what Annie said, and that is to, educate, but I just feel like I personally am just trying to figure this all out myself, right now, because we just came in we're trying to come out of one thing and go into another, and it's just hitting us at both ends. And, I'm still trying to figure this out myself. I feel like I'm trying to isolate myself to cope with what's going on. But as far as what Annie had mentioned, discussing and educating people and just using your voice versus in a peaceful way, you can get that message across a lot better than hurting others, because you're just causing more chaos than, I mean, we have enough chaos as it is.
Yeah, I totally agree with those comments for sure, and I appreciate you just being honest and saying I don't know. There's
Yeah.
people that don't know, and that's okay. I don't know. We don't. I don't think anybody really knows all the answers, and it's really just very stressful, and it's probably even more stressful being in that isolated state, right? Like I don't know what to do, and
Mhm.
I totally agree. I think I was there about 3 weeks ago with the whole COVID-19 thing and being in my home for 3 months. It's like I don't know
It's
what
like,
to do.
okay, I know what to do here, you know, okay, this is
Hmm.
the plan. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna keep this routine and we're just gonna keep moving forward. But then now we have all of these
Right.
outside, you know, all these different variables going on out there, and we can control what we do, but we can't control what others are doing. And those can, those people could come into our space, and how would we, you know, respond to that, right?
Yep,
So
that's right.
that's kind of like where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and actually and I want to hear from Selena, see what tips she has, but I want to come back to that point. That point is also something very common that we hear in businesses that are dealing with massive competition. Is that's the external environment. We don't have control over what the competitors are doing or what the government's doing, but we have control of what we do as a company and the stance that we take and the positions we take and the values we have. So I want to come back to that a little bit. That was an interesting point for me, related to something that's happening in the greater scheme of society versus what we hear in businesses a lot with regards to, dealing with external pressures and how do you deal with that. So I want to come back to that. So Selena, any tips from you? How do we stay focused?
I mean, this definitely is a new, this is a new, well, I don't know. I mean, a part of me wants to say that this is a new scenario, but I suppose it would just kind of depend, for the audience, because for a lot, this isn't new. This is exactly the day-to-day situations for them. And this is just kind of perhaps broadened the perspectives. And I think everybody's just processing a little bit differently. And I think it's important to keep that in mind and just to be respectful and to do a lot of self-reflecting, to do a lot of perspective taking, and to be aware of perhaps, some of your limitations, and to be aware of areas where yeah, perhaps maybe additional education is needed, and to be conscious of whom you're reaching out for that, and just the self accountability. This is work on yourself that you may have to do. And for some people, they may have been doing this work for a long time already. So just be kind, be humble. Yeah.
All great points. I think that the interesting part of what's happening in our society today, and you're hitting on it really well, is that this is really taking a toll on our society at a very individual level, right? At a very like personal level, whether you're black or white or Asian or Hispanic, it's like it's hitting us, right? And for a lot of us, we've never really seen these kind of massive riots, like people who saw the LA riots back in the day, right? So for a large part of our society, this is somewhat fresh, but not everybody. To Selena's point, some people have experienced this before. When it comes to the workplace and when it comes to working and staying focused, there's things that you all have hit on that I want to highlight. And one is self-reflection, right? So there comes a point, and here we're talking about, the George Floyd situation, the COVID-19, right? Some big monumental things. Well, years ago, this similar conversation was happening with regards to um, the hurricanes that affected Florida and all the way to New Orleans, right? And so people lost their homes, people lost their livelihoods, and all that. So we had to do a great deal of self-reflection for those of us that were working on what were we doing in the greater scheme of things, right? With regards to society as a business, and a lot of businesses started helping out the community at large, right? So that's pretty interesting where we are now versus if you think about a few years ago, what was happening in New Orleans that got desecrated, or Puerto Rico that just recently got desecrated with hurricanes. And I know that's a natural disaster, but this is now a human disaster if we think about it that way. Now we got human beings putting us at risk. So the self-reflection, I think that was one key thing I took from all three of you. Like what how do we deal with this? The second thing, and I want to commend this you three. The reason why I thought this was kind of cool is that you three all represent, you work together, right? You work in an organization and you collaborate. And one of the things that I think is really important and staying focused is getting people to talk to each other. And you all kind of mentioned that here and there. You know, too often we isolate ourselves. We are independent workers, so we work alone, and and most of the time that's fine. But when you're in a state of emergency or a state of crisis and the world is kind of caving on everybody, the last thing you should do is isolate. So organizations now are kind of pressing the gas pedal to really get people talking to each other almost on a daily basis that never talked to each other before. So getting them in virtual meetings like this, or having phone calls, touching base, emails, whatever the case may be. But that human contact that has been missing in our work society for a while now because we've been so digitized. Um, is to really understand that talking to each other can be the differentiator between getting through this and not getting through this. Um, so that's the second thing I wanted to mention. And then the third thing I wanted to mention too is in companies that are dealing with high external pressure, like from competitors or the government, regulations or what have you. Um, One of the things that companies do, and you guys kind of mentioned it, was isolate the external pressures. Like, what can we focus on? What's in our control, right? As an individual, as an organization. And by the way, I did say you all work together. You all work together in the same field, not necessarily the same company. My apologies. Thank you, Selena. So my point is that there are times where uh, organizations or independent individuals can take that moment and say, okay, what do I have control over? Well, I have the students that I work with, or I have the school that I work with, right? I have the cases that I can fulfill. For me, I have my own projects that I can work on. And so it's taking the notion of those long-term goals that we've been aiming for, like the annual goals or whatever, and then just boil it down to like, what do I want to get accomplished this week, just this week, and not so much worry about the next 6 months, or 12 months, because of there's so much uncertainty of what's happening that all we can do is get back to certainty. So where's the level of certainty in my work life that I can control? And right now, at least what I'm talking to with colleagues and clients alike is just, what's your weekly goal? What are you trying to achieve this week? Even if it's just touching base with colleagues, or touching base with my clients or my students, or just getting some documentation done that I've been lingering on for a couple of weeks. Like, whatever I can achieve this week, at least that gets me back to a point of some sense of some control in my work environment. And I think that that's desperately needed in the workplace, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are just kind of struggling with trying to get work done, but there's the focus is out of focus. So that's my 2 cents. I was curious if any one of you had any thoughts about those. So the self-reflection, staying in contact with each other, and then boiling it down to some controllable goals. Those are my three things. So with like 5 minutes left, because the remaining timer is going to kick us off. This is what I get for doing the free version of Zoom. Rachel, any last minute comments?
I mean, the only thing that I'm holding on to is basically what I plan out to do every single day. and just tackling those things, keeping my mind busy, to just kind of, get through everything basically.
Cool. I love it. Keep that up, Rachel. Annie?
Yeah, workload wise, Selena has taught us a lot about self management. So I put a lot of those things into practice and making like realistic. The end goal is lovely, but like what little steps are done this day to get toward that end goal, and keeping that in mind. So that professionally is important. And then also just like with the school year ending, trying to keep the momentum of learning, and thankfully I have these ladies to hold me accountable and studying for the test that I'll soon take after, hopefully, and just kind of keeping that momentum, but also educating in terms of the world, the issues that are happening around us too. So kind of allowing for time to educate on all different types of things that are important to me right now.
Beautiful. Excellent, Annie. Thank you. Selena?
Yeah, thank you, Manny, for that. Yeah, Manny, I totally agree. The breaking down kind of the micro goals. And yes, we have communicated on that within this group of, what are your monthly, daily, weekly goals, and then a larger perspective of your yearly goals. How are you, kind of pinpointing and breaking that down, and essentially setting up your environment to really be successful. And yes, that helps out tremendously. Setting up, for me, I set up Sunday evenings. I go ahead and set up my week for the entire week. So that is very helpful. And then, within the week, I'll go ahead and break things down with work as well as, personal goals as well. So I kind of have that mindset throughout, and it is extremely helpful. And of course, there's a visual way as well, assessing your goals. So that's needed. You need to see that. So yeah, it's helpful.
All right, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, Annie, and Selena, for joining me today on Mondays with Manny. I really appreciate it. By the way, for those listening, they did not know that we were going to do this today, so they were totally good sports, and I appreciate it immensely. I did have a plan of what I was going to talk about, but we decided to change it collectively, so that was cool. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. As always, please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next Monday. Okay? Bye all.